right, I think we've got this. So once again, welcome to Soul Cafe, interview on self-progress, and we're going to start with a reflection. Very often during the day, I become quite distracted, entangled, by what's happening around me. And also by maintaining my image with respect to what's happening around me. I become a human doing. And so I enjoy quiet moments like this, where I stop, turn inwards, and check. Being able to check the self is such a critical aspect of self-transformation. Being able to check the self with honesty. Very good quality of checking. Not be blinded by the image. And see exactly what I am doing, where I am, relative to the truth. In my spiritual alignment, checking the state of my inner kingdom, the degree of inner peace, checking my intentions and motives, checking the cleanliness in the heart. These are all incognito aspects, require I be very quiet and clear. No one else can check these for me. Being able to check the self. I do not sit here to check out. I am here to check in and check the self. Om Shanti. Om Shanti. Welcome to Soul Cafe. Today is an interview format, as mentioned, on self-progress, and specifically the signs of self-progress. And while listening to the commentary, I was thinking if I was someone who just flown into this session and hearing all these things I need to check. What drive one want to check these things? Do you feel? I think it definitely depends on the individual, what they experience as it's really, perhaps for the soul starts, what they experience as attainment. Why would I even be interested in self-progress? So what do I experience as an attainment? Do I experience spiritual transformation as an attainment? So that's maybe where it all starts, and that would motivate me to want to check where I'm at relative to spirituality.
So for those who have not attended any of the center's interviews online, they are based on Raja Yoga. And so we know, for those who have taken the course and listened in quite a few times, this is really all based on soul consciousness. What happens if there isn't soul consciousness and you're really striving for these different things to check? Because it is something that matters to many. Character does.
I think what's really important, even if one has no exposure, is, in terms of the physical body, when the body's experiencing pain, there are some who perhaps wish to just medicate for the pain to go away, and that's completely understandable. But I know for myself, and I think for many, they'd like to know the cause of the pain, so that it doesn't become chronic, so it can be addressed, to know the cause of the pain, and they will be motivated to check what they're doing. Once they know what's causing the pain, they'll want to check that they're not doing that thing that causes the pain. I remember a story that one of the senior sisters had shared, where in her, I think, early 20s, she was in a very severe car accident. And I believe she was on the passenger side, and which was the side that was hit. All the glass shattered into her. And so it was incredibly intense in terms of just the medical attention that was required in hospital a long time. And, nerves were affected and chronic. And there came a point where she sort of realized that she was in incredible pain. This was well after the incident. When there's nerves involved, it can almost be a lifetime thing. And she noticed that every step was painful. And then she figured out what she was doing that was causing the pain. There could not be even a trace of violence in how she moved the body, not even, she can't rush, not a trace. So she had to be extremely attentive to how she moved. If she wasn't, then there would be pain. And we're very motivated to not feel pain. So this is a physical example. Again, some just medicate, but we sort of might be inspired to, what's the cause of pain? And I don't want to keep repeating that mechanic that's causing the pain. So I'm checking constantly. So the same sort of goes for spirituality. I need to find the connection between when I feel sorrow or pain and what's causing the pain. And this can be very easily misdiagnosed. So I might, more often than not, especially before coming into something like Raj Yoga or any self, sort of reflective practice, I might think the cause of the pain is a person or situation. That is something out there that is causing me pain. So now I'm always checking that thing or person is not happening, right? So I have to make sure I've got the right connection between what's causing the pain, and that's the thing I want to check. Now, once one's on a sort of self-reflective journey, perhaps it becomes clear that the cause of the pain, the sorrow, is internal. So then I'm very motivated to check and to understand how to address that internal thing that's causing pain. So that's maybe the first thing because we're very motivated to not feel sorrow or pain.
It's interesting that you're sharing, because I was thinking about this aspect of personal responsibility, what role that plays in terms of, that it's not out there.
Yeah, I think, if we are open and fearless enough and courageous enough to look honestly. The most common, example we use is that exposing two people to the same stimuli, and they have very different experiences, which suggests it's not the stimuli, but something within us. So eventually, and it's very disempowering, quite frankly, to feel that things external to me are determining what I experience, how I feel. That's an extremely disempowering model. It's far more empowering. Okay, it's things inside of me that are determining how I feel. I can do something about that, but I can't really. And of course, this is how we go about our lives: is we try and control everything out there, and we get very stressed as a result of it, and that causes even more pain. But if I realize, okay, it's things within me, this is wonderful because that can be within my control.
This aspect of, when we're going back to this topic of signs of self-progress, and you were talking about the image, I was thinking about this aspect of value, what we call it self-worth, and how much that plays a role. Now, it's tricky because this, whatever it is that's going on within yourself, this whole thing about self-checking, some have expressed that they are afraid that they'll just end up blaming themselves.
So hopefully, the model that one is working with is quite robust and involves some measure of understanding, so that I can understand. So for example, back to the example, because it's safe to use of the body, I might be, okay, I notice that when I do this particular mechanic, there's pain, but I need to understand how that even happened. Is there injury involved? I need to understand the body. There needs to be a lot of understanding to be able to correct that, so that's productive rather than, sort of debilitating or blaming the self. So to really, and that requires, I think, a wisdom and an insight, especially spiritually, to be able to really understand. I find this one of the most beautiful aspects of a robust spiritual practice, is that it has, so there's no violence. It has really a comprehensive level of understanding, so that I can not come into that, the heaviness of feeling bad or blaming the self, or, as often happens, violence, trying to push something through without proper understanding.
So, we're talking about signs of spiritual progress, and but I've heard you mention in different sessions that there are often parallels in terms of say, physical progress. So there's obviously so many different categories you can explore. But in terms of, even again, the commentary about the subtle checking, and why are we having to always be looking at the subtle? Because that seems to be even a word that might be a little bit too deep for some.
So this was actually on my mind a lot today, because we were talking about this morning, and we have a saying in our practice, is your checking machine working? How good is your checking machine? We find it very entertaining, but it's actually a really important piece. Does my checking machine work? Because, I noticed in physical fitness, and it's really fascinating, and it's very different for each person. We can use the word subtle or sensitivity. They're really very similar. But I noticed in physical fitness, and we were talking about this morning, like say in dance, that there's kind of a surface level that everyone sees. And just because the biggest thing that compromises my checking machine from working well, which is why we say honesty, is ego, that seeking of value. So if ego is interfering, then there's distortion in my checking. So in something like dance, I'm getting my leg high, I'm jumping high. On the surface, it looks like it's a wow thing going on here. And so I'm checking, it's like, no, I'm doing all these incredible things. And in fact, if you're not looking carefully, it looks like it's the same as what someone else is doing. They got their leg up here, I got my leg up here. I jumped this side, they jumped. It looks on the surface like you're doing the same thing. And I always find that fascinating because people say, wow, yeah. I'm like, actually, they were completely different. But I don't know what people were looking at. So, for example, I can get my leg high. One is I could get high with proper placement, and the other is I could get my leg high throwing my pelvis off. Now, most people are so distracted by the leg going high that they don't actually notice what's happening on the subtle level. That I went completely out of alignment in order to get my leg high. And that's an ego thing. So when it comes to spiritual checking, we're always the main checking we want to do is that the subtle checking of what we call alignment to the body is awareness to the soul. So, what is that awareness I have it might look really quite fantastic on the surface, and many people will be impressed. So I'm getting this feedback that it's fantastic. Wow, that was such a good lecture, or whatever the case might be. But I will know if I'm really sensitive to what's going on, I will know what actually happened. So that's really, it depends on, it's a quality thing, and it depends on sensitivity or subtlety. How good is my checking machine?
So in terms of that piece, I know you're using these examples in terms of physicality. What are some signs of self-progress that maybe has a lot to do with what is my idea of success?
I think, of course, one of the most interesting is what happens to me when I'm in a very challenging or adverse situation. That's probably one of the most interesting signs that allows me to check what's going on. But it's, things like, I remember once being with a senior brother and he asked the question, what is a sign that you're getting closer to the destination? And the one thing that, the answers were always internal things. So for me anyways, that there's less thinking, period. There's less of everything, period. But there's no waste thought. So there's no expansion, there's no melodrama. None of this is going on in the mind. It's extremely simple. And we use in Raj Yoga the sign that I am close to Om Shanti Hema, the sign that I am close. Did you want to share something, Hema? Wasn't sure.
You're welcome.
Om Shanti. I just have a question when we talk about the dance. So, I mean, that there's a Tai Chi dance and Qigong, right? So even those movements, right? I don't know anything, but even if I look at the video and if I want to imitate what they are doing, if we do that, it feels very energetic because you pay so much of attention on your movement, right? So why so? Why those dances are different than other ones, right? Because this is very powerful. That's how it feels.
For me, in a really simple way, when it comes to the body, movement is movement. Whether it's Qigong or Tai Chi or ballet or hip hop or running or biking or skiing, movement is movement. And the same principles will apply whatever the movement. So this is why, very often with, say, dancers who look at the very foundation, like it goes so deeply in the foundation of movement, you'll find dancers can cross over into all different kinds of movement very easily, because the principle of movement is the same. The literacy of movement is the same wherever you're applying it. Now, that's my opinion. Someone may completely disagree with me, and I would understand that, but the body's built a certain way. Now, I know some of them we call the mind-body. If you're going to cross that line, then you're starting to come into principles of spirituality awareness is awareness. We're all souls. So it's, to say it's different. So I guess what I'm saying is, again, on the surface, it might appear that different things are going on, but underneath, like when I do say something, I don't do a lot of it, but I don't do any really, but if I'm watching someone do a Tai Chi and I'm following along, I'm paying attention to the same things internally that I do when I'm doing, say, ballet or lifting some weights. I'm paying attention to the same things. They aren't different to me because movement of the body is the same. Now, the irony is, and someone mentioned this the other day, and it's true, the thing that's very important to me is awareness. And awareness is actually a spiritual thing. We say spiritual awareness, but actually to be aware is a spiritual function. In some cases, I'm applying it to the body or whatever. So that's a key part of movement to me, is that I be aware of what I'm doing. So when I'm doing these different, like whether it's Qigong or Tai Chi or whatever, I could be looking at the surface movement, on the surface what's going on, and say, wow, they're all so different. But if I'm looking at what's the foundation of movement, they all kind of share that awareness of what's going on at a very deep level. And those who are queuing for those different practices, they're really drawing attention always to the same thing. Like I can understand the language they're using when I go into a different practice. Their cueing is always kind of the same, because the principles of movement are the principles of movement. So there theoretically isn't going to be a lot of difference if I'm paying attention to the root. There will be a lot of difference if I'm paying attention, and I always found this really interesting. There was a soul who was taking an aerobics class, and this was a really high intensity aerobics class, jumping around and high impact and all this. But this soul had deep, I think they were professional, deep training in ballet. And I remember when they took the fitness class, which some would say is very different from ballet, if you're looking at the surface. But I would watch her, and it was so clear she was applying the same principles. Now, no one else understood I didn't get the feeling, because they were very irritated by her, actually. They're like, why is she always off the beat? I mean, it was remarkable what she was doing, quite frankly, but I could see she was very intentional in applying the same principles. And I know I have that kind of feeling as well. When I'm taking a fitness class and they say knees up, it's what actually drives the knee up. What's the placement through like, I'm not going to let the rest of the body fall apart for the sake of getting my knee high. That goes completely against movement principles. So am I operating on the surface, or am I checking at the root? That's always the question, whether it's a physical endeavor or, in this case, a spiritual endeavor. How is my checking machine? So theoretically, movement is movement is movement. And I should be getting similar benefits from these different movement practices. Did that make sense, Emma? Maybe not.
Yeah, but I mean, because I haven't done any other dance, but those moments, I mean, when we do that, it really makes you feel like the soul conscious experience, because it's very subtle, because the movement is so slow, and I don't know, it's just me.
And that really is the objective of many of the mind-body disciplines, is that they are slow enough to give you a chance to have awareness. But the concept is that when I go into speeded up movements, I still should be able to keep awareness. That's the idea. And this really crosses over into spirituality. We start extremely slow. We all say, oh, I have great experiences when I'm seated in meditation. I mean, you can't get any slower than sitting still, right? I have great experiences in seated meditation. Well, the objective of spirituality is to speed things up. As I walk and move around, as I'm racing to the train, as I'm dodging, a car or whatever, I'm still in that awareness. I want to get to the point where I don't say, I have a better experience when I'm seated. So if that makes any sense, I want the same principle to apply. So in movement, yes, there are some movement disciplines called mind-body disciplines where you do slow things down and you very intentionally focus on alignment. And we say, wow, that had a better experience for me. But the aim is that even in what we call ballistic or rapid movement, I have that same consciousness, that same stillness inside as I come. And I've seen athletes, it's quite interesting. I know for me, it's why I'm quite pulled to calisthenic movement, which is just using mostly body weight. I can tell that they have this understanding inside. They can lift very heavy weights, they can run, they can move very fast. Whatever they do, it has the same grace, the same mindfulness, because they're working on the awareness and they're integrating that work into all the different movement disciplines they do. So yes, these slower mind-body practices can encourage, just like seated meditation makes it easier for us to be soul conscious, these slower mind-body practices can encourage us to have a very light, peaceful feeling inside. The question is, can I take those same principles I'm using to other movement practices so I have that same experience? That to me is when it's interesting. Does that make sense, Emma?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
It's a great question. I hope it doesn't detract from the topic, though, because I was thinking about, and I will reel it back in terms of how subtle is the basic mechanics. Because how about many say, well, I have a very spiritual experience when I go to the mountains. Like, where do you draw the line then of what is a spiritual experience? Because you can feel peaceful. And I guess that's the thing. I mean, now we're going to like subtle, like I'm peaceful in this situation, but I don't feel the same thing in this situation. Mm-hmm. But, and I know I had asked that question at one point in time. Talking about functional movement, you had mentioned about in certain exercises that are meant to, so that you would be able to, you're basically demanded to use your core or use a certain alignment in very practical ways. But is there a way to know that what you're doing is going to be transferable or not? Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, the mountain example is interesting because obviously it suggests, okay, I need a mountain range with me wherever I go. If that's the source of my peaceful experience, and there's clearly going to be some logistical problems. So we're looking to make sure that our concept of spirituality or peace is accurate. And that's where it becomes very sensitive. Please, souls will be like, please don't disturb my understanding of spirituality. It's working for me. And of course, a really accurate concept of spirituality is unconditional or unlimited. It will work in every situation. It does not require certain conditions or facilities to be in effect. So that's something that we always need to check in our concept of spirituality. If it requires that there be a mountain range in front of me or that I be in nature, then this is going to be a pretty high condition to have to meet. I can only have a spiritual experience when I'm in the mountains.
So in terms of the parallel with what you're sharing about, mm-hmm. that there are basic principles of movement that crosses all types of movement.
Yeah.
Like, because I was thinking about if we're going to just talk about awareness, if my awareness was really something I really wanted to focus on, it wouldn't matter. You put me in a bathroom to clean the toilets, mm-hmm. or, in the position as a CEO, mm-hmm. or in front of people, like thousands of people, yeah. That should not change in terms of what matters.
Yeah, absolutely. So, really is my idea of spirituality. Does it have that unlimited? Can it apply in any situation? Just as in movement, these basic principles of movement, they should be cross-trainable, if you will, that they should be applicable in any training situation I find myself in.
So then it really helps to tie in what signs of self-progress.
Mhm.
You should be able to, it shouldn't be preferences to see certain
No.
signs of certain situations.
Yeah, no, it's kind of I'm checking, and that is the thing. I'm checking for the same thing in all the different situations. I'm checking for the same thing, you know. And I remember when I was young, and you know, sort of looking at sports, and I was always really just so inspired by the decathletes. You know, these athletes who had to do the 10 sports that are quite different, you know, swimming and running and all this crazy. I just thought, wow, that, or the Renaissance man, you know, really appealed to me. We use the term all-rounder, really appealed to me. And I didn't know why, you know, but it's that idea, if you get the very seed of it, you know, it should be applicable in all sorts of different situations. If I can just get that seed. And so with movement, whatever movement practice I'm doing, I find myself checking the same things, versus, you know, these sort of external or superficial signs, but really checking the same internal. The same with spirituality. The thing we're checking for is, have I lost myself? That's what we're always checking for in every situation. Spirituality, you know, spiritual practice enables me first and foremost to have an experience of myself.
That
very
in itself
time.
seems to be quite a journey.
That's huge. An authentic.
You can't even get
time.
then the get-go, so
No.
you're still muddling through.
So we use the term we've heard already, soul conscious, or I am a soul, to have that experience. And we bring God in because as a being who actually helps me to have a pure experience of myself. This idea of yoga that we talk about in Raj Yoga, when I am connected to that being, that is the only being I connect to who gives me a real experience of myself. So that is the thing I am checking for in all these different situations, is I want to show up wherever I go. So I don't want to be one thing over here. I want to be present. And yes, it's such a journey even to have an experience of my real self. There's so many layers of the image, so many layers. And they become what we call very royal. They look really good. They look really spiritual, but it's still not me. So that's why, you know, we have students in this study who have been here, and I'm not saying it needs to take this long, but you know, 50, 60, 70, 80 years, same knowledge as day one. I am a soul, same knowledge. They're still work, you know, some come say, oh yeah, no, I'm good to go. I've got it. Yeah, I got it. No, soul conscious. I'm good. Let's move on. I'm always humbled whenever I hear this knowledge. I'm so humbled because to really appreciate, it's trying to strip away so many layers. And I don't mean to sound disheartening. It's very exciting. You know, I mean, if you want to be free from pain, inauthenticity is the number one cause of pain. You know, so to have a method that enables me to connect, to experience my true self is wonderful. I don't in any way begrudge the journey or the length of the journey or what happens on the journey, but that's ultimately what I'm checking for, is the liberation of my true self. And it's constantly going back into bondage of ego or attachment or desires. I want it to be completely free. So when we look at little children, we can see the freedom that they're completely themselves, at least for a very short period at the beginning of their lives. And then it slowly starts to change.
So before I check in, for those who might have questions, in terms of deceptions, I suppose, and of self-progress, it was interesting you're using that word inauthenticity, because I was thinking about what, even maybe for yourself, how do you stay real to keeping it very vibrant, that I just want to be authentic? Because excuse me, I don't think this is just in spiritual study. I think it's across the board. I've seen it in artists. These artists, where they always feel like I want to kind of go back to the original time when I tended to be a lot more authentic about what I was doing.
I think, I like this phrase that we hear in the study sometimes, equanimity in praise and defamation. And defamation is pretty obvious. Someone insults us or criticizes us and we feel a little pinch and we can very clearly say, okay, that's my ego who's been hit, that's fine. Praise is slippery. Praise is what you have to be really careful about. It's ego is so hungry to stay alive. And sometimes we are actually keeping each other stuck. Love is wonderful. Be very loving to each other, absolutely. But to feed my ego, please don't. Please don't. It's just, so we're kind of, there's always, the ego is always like a little octopus. It's its tentacles out looking for where can I get value. Ego means valuing the self for all the wrong reasons.
You can have a movie called that, a story called that.
It's going to have this little animation like this, which looks frightening. So this is this is the thing that's going to keep pulling us off. And it's very beautiful. It's very beautiful. I'm not saying that souls are disgenuine when they compliment and support each other. It's very beautiful. I just need to check what I'm doing. And so I very often am going, okay, why did I come into this spiritual practice? And I'm always checking what, and so I don't get pulled off course. We don't want to be rude or anything, sort of reject someone's compliment or whatever. That's beautiful, but I don't want to be pulled off course. So today the focus was, we are on a path where we may fall, so we have to be very cautious. I think that was excellent. That was excellent, in the sense that it's the good looking stuff that's going to pull us off. Actually, the really challenging, it's easy for us to figure that out. It's the subtle, very nice looking things that's going to really distract us. So I always have to be very aware. What did I come? I always have this little conversation with God. I said, look, you know exactly what I came here for. You know exactly what I came here for. And it just keeps one sober and on track. And yes, it's the authentic self, the true self. That's what we came here for.
Would you say that, to take the time constantly to revisit, my reasons is so worthwhile? Because I think many feel like, whoa, I want to go full steam ahead, why do I want to kind of go back on some of these subtle things?
Well, yeah, and I think enthusiasm is fantastic, but quite frankly, when you're running a race, the finish line is in front. So it's actually not going back. I set my objective at the beginning. I'm going to cross that finish line, and I know what that finish line looks like. So it's actually in front, but I set it at the beginning.
So clarifying.
Yeah. So yes, it's constantly in my mind where I'm trying what that finish line looks like for me, what that destination or objective looks like for me. It's always in front. When someone's running a race, they don't feel like I'm looking back at the finish line. It's like I start the race knowing where I'm going to get to, and it's always pulling me, it's always in front of me. So the objective, otherwise, you can imagine where you're running and you suddenly go off track because something else distracts you. Oh, that looks like a better objective over there. No, I'm always running towards that same destination that I set at the beginning of the race.
I guess it's back to what are signs of success.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to check in. I know, Hema, I think you might have unmuted yourself. Did you have another question?
Not a question, but what Judy-Ben was sharing just now about it's easy to be very slippery when there is a praise involved, right? I mean, if somebody's criticizing you, it's very easy for us to be soul conscious, and then that time ego doesn't get involved much. But when the praise comes on a way, that's where we have to be very careful that Am I getting any value when somebody's praising me or compliments me and all? So that's very, very important. It's very, very critical. It's very critical.
There's something really, I thought, so brilliant in so many ways that Brahma Baba, who is the instrument, established the organization and the spiritual head for a very long time. Something that he was inspired to do. Again, we always feel it was God inspiring him to do these things. But so they had different departments as the family, the original community was growing. Different departments. There was the baking, the food, the kitchen. There was accounting. There was maintenance and repair, and all these different departments. And after a few months, he would move them around, right? So, because what happens now is we're not moved around.
Yeah.
And so souls start to say, literally, they say, no, well, this is what I do. This is my thing. And that's the beginning of a very dangerous place. Because the moment, the way ego sort of works is that it figures out the identity to latch onto and becomes very sensitive to the value around that identity. So it might be, I am a mother. The next step is, am I a good mother? Am I a better mother than other mothers? So this is kind of, so I am good at repairing cars, or I am clever with technology. I'm more clever than that person over there. So he would move them around. And this did a couple of things. It obviously made them into all-rounders and really gave them immediate proof that spirituality works. If I maintain spiritual awareness, I can pretty much be a problem solver in any situation, whatever's thrown at me. So it really developed their spirituality, but also it kept them safe from putting their sense of self into a particular role or a particular responsibility. I remember when I first came into it, and bless everyone's heart, no one was doing anything wrong, but I noticed that quite early, souls would they don't really do it much anymore, thank goodness, but they would say, oh yes, you're the dancer, or you're the dancers, And it was weird because I never identified, even before I came into the study, I did not identify myself that way. Even when I was like engrossed in dance, I did not identify. There was a piece of me that didn't feel satisfied, quite frankly, and felt there was something almost dangerous about doing that. But they would identify with me as a dancer. Now, many people try and address that by not dancing. And that isn't actually what we're trying to do. It's I can continue to do everything. It's just that my sense of self remains intact. Right? So I'm a soul who happens to be dancing at this moment through the body, but I am a soul. I'm a soul who happens to be repairing this car at the moment. And always that feeling that Brahma Baba was giving us, as the soul, you are extremely valuable. Extremely, so valuable as a soul. But as a mechanic, you're replaceable. This is really important consciousness to have, that my value is in the right place.
That's back into, I need to be experiencing something that's special, that's valuable. Then I can feel that link between what are signs of progress when the experience of you as a soul is a subtle experience, and yet it has to actually feel meaningful and gratifying.
Absolutely. So really, the sign of progress is I feel that sense of self-respect growing. I feel that self-value going. So I'm sorry, I never completed the answer you asked long ago, but that simplicity, but really top of the list is easiness. So easy with everything.
Signs of
self-progress is really easy going. Praise, defamation, this goes well, it doesn't go well. It doesn't, and not to be confused with careless. Someone who has self-progress is actually extremely attentive, very attentive, but easy in terms of the reactivity is reducing, because the source of the reactivity is that ego. So if I'm actually building self-respect, which means egos, if I'm valuing myself for all the right reasons, then the valuing the self for all the wrong reasons is going down. And so all the different reactivity and melodrama was really because of that ego. But if it's reducing, not because I'm beating it to a pulp, but because I'm valuing myself for the right reason. This study, when we say study or progress, this study is unusual because it's a study of the self. The subject matter is the self, and specifically restoring the original dignity, the original stage of the self. That is the subject matter. So that when we say progress, we're progressing in the study, it's that original dignity, the original self is being restored. So the signs is all of the different dynamics that went along with not self are reducing, and reactivity and melodrama and all of this is a huge part of not being in my original stage. So if those are going down, and there's more stability, more peace, more contentment, easiness, then these are signs of self-progress. They're all very internal, but they will show up externally. They do create a certain vibe or feeling. Others enjoy that company. So.
Just checking in. Pauline, do you have any questions at all? Or anyone who's on YouTube, which I don't know.
I think one person has joined.
Maybe just to add on with, my personal experience with self-progress. So, we have the goal, why we need progress in our personal life. And I've experienced that, the more, you strive, you made an effort, to be, soul conscious and recognizing your weaknesses, the more, the resistance and the more impurities are coming out. So again, ego will come out. Either you feel superior or, you feel inferior. So, and just my recent realization is to see my personal self-progress is to accept, understand, and acknowledge my weaknesses, and like yesterday, actually this was an attainment that I experienced. One soul came to me and told me that, another soul, which is, a client, complained about my service. And, in a physical state, it's like nobody ever complained about my service, for how many years. So that's in the body conscious, or, you're in a state that, oh, I'm a good, therapist or whatever. So when I heard that particular comment that someone complained to me about my service, I was actually, I didn't really react, but I need to work on something. So that's the very first thing that I told myself, that I need to work something. And it might be something that the person is more, maybe she's not in a state of, or maybe she's so stressed. That's why she cannot really, appreciate things. But, every effort that I do, or with regards to my work, and make sure that it's coming from, the purity of my intention, and, the intention of not doing any harm. So anyway, at the end of the day, the story changed, and it was on a different practitioner. But again, having that information that, someone complained you didn't really affect how I feel about myself, because I know who am I, and anything that's happening outside doesn't affect me. And as my homework to, with Nora, is being a master, or, of your physical senses. So what I hear doesn't affect of what's going on outside. So I think that's a sign of progress that I would share when it comes to, someone, wasn't happy about something that you did, or, so identifying your weakness, accepting it, understanding it, and just remain stable and calm. And yeah. So
Daddy Janki was such a master of this. I think all the daddies were, but I mean, she was incredibly honest. In fact, her memorial has this as one of the qualities: cleanliness, simplicity, and honesty, to of an extremely high degree. I'd say she's one of the top souls on the planet when it comes to honesty. And she would really sort of encourage that. I won't say demand, but encourage it in those around her. I don't know if we can ever appreciate the depth of her honesty, but she would share that because there were criticisms that would come for various reasons, and she would always be very clear about what aspect of the criticism was around the soul stage, the one making the criticism, what belonged to that soul. She always felt there was some kernel of something useful for herself in what was being said, and she always the only way she could possibly have a productive response to criticism was because she was in her self-respect. She couldn't do anything, it was just remarkable, the transformation that soul achieved through such a high level of honesty that was based on truth, on that self-respect. So it was very inspiring when we would see how she would work with these different scenarios that came up that were on, I personally think, a level that most of us will not have to deal with. The stakes were very high when you get to the leadership at that level. But I always found it very interesting, her level of honesty, and most found it quite overwhelming. So, but definitely am I still reacting, or I'm now responding and using understanding to process things that come from the outside? Absolutely.
We're deliberately running over time because we were late. So we were late.
That never happens.
But just listening to both Pauline, your sharing, and also Emma, your sharing as well, is really feeling about the subtlety and being able to really have such a sense of value. I mean, like, we're talking about, we mentioned in the course that you are not defined by the package, by people, by possessions, by positions, and how real does that feeling of my sense of self feel, that it's completely irrespective of all these things. It makes you realize how subtle the check-in can be, especially when it comes to praise. Like it could be that, one is soul conscious when they're feeling defamation, or it could be that they feel a pinch and they feel, I still am not there yet. But even at the same time, when there is praise, to be able to detect it. And I was only thinking about that word grace that comes in interface a lot, to be able to respond with grace, even when it comes to both praise and defamation. Not that it makes the person feel kind of ignored because you don't know how to deal with a compliment, or how to deal with something that's said that might feel like an insult as well.
Yeah, I think it was Daddy who used to joke, I did not come here to be liked. I came here to become pure. Of course, she was deeply loved by all. I mean, I'm not sure what kind of a sense you're getting about Daddy Jenkins. She was deeply loved and respected by all. But she used to, sort of say, look, and she said it mostly for us to hear. Because she, I always felt she played the role of nurse, that she was put into this position of being the nurse for a while in the organization, the community, no training, but excellent intellect. And, I always got the feeling that the reason Brahma Baba has her playing that sort of position for a while was because she could really x-ray the soul. She could really see what's going on in a soul and respond. So she responds to one soul one way and to another soul a different way. Really, and we heard this when we listened to the memorial, the different souls sharing who had been with her. They all say the same thing over and over. Daddy could look at them and see them in a way they had never seen themselves. So she really could talk about, I mean, we're talking again about a good checking machine. And in physical fitness, I definitely get to see it, that everyone has a very different checking machine, a different level of sensitivity to that alignment and being able to check themselves relative to healthy alignment. So, and the same applies to spirituality. There's, the different checking machines. So it serves well to take time to, and it's not being violent, or it's a form of self-care, because we're checking, am I aligning with something healthy? Right? So it's a very caring thing to do for the self. I think we're all very tired of just being an image walking around. I think we're done with that. And yet we become tired of it at a time when we're most addicted or attached to it. So it puts us in a challenging scenario in the sense there's so much resistance. And it's like sticky. We're trying to let it go and it's sticking on to us. So lots of resistance. And it keeps sort of transforming itself to stick around, gets more and more royal and what it looks like. So how to have good checking, and it's never a sense of violence or rejection or punishment when we say checking, but just really supporting the self in moving towards the destination, progressing.
Well, thank you, Judy. Lovely questions that both of you asked. It's such a big topic. I think it takes more than an hour, but I regret
we have gone more than an hour. So
well, we're a little late, so but perhaps we'll have a little reflection.
Something stayed with me when Mohini Didi shared about Daddy Janki. That one time in a meeting, she was corrected that, for some small thing or so, right? So, she being holding such a good position, and she was loved by everyone. And as we all know, that she has a very powerful self-checking machine and everything. So she didn't do anything intentionally, and she knows, everybody knows. But then also, like, for some reason, she was corrected. And in the same meeting, at the end, she was asked that, would you be able to go on a dais and share something about something? So if it would have been some other soul, they would have said, oh yeah, no, I'm not good enough, right? So, and like 99% cases, we wouldn't be that enthusiastic to go on a dais and share about something. But she was just upright and said, yes. And it stayed with me. Even Mohini Devi was sharing that it's really interesting. Like, the self-respect, right? When we're talking about self-respect, no matter what, no one can even dent a little bit of her self-respect. You say whatever you feel and whatever you want, but she is upright on her self-respect. It's really wonderful. It is so wonderful.
Yeah, and I know that she would, if there was criticism, she was able to discern what was relevant in that criticism and correct herself. She appreciated it, and yeah, it's quite remarkable. Mm-hmm.
It's just like just now Pauline said that, right? And somebody criticized, and she realized, oh yeah, I need to be corrected somewhere, and I have to do something different. And like it's a self-checking for all of us. Like, that's what we need to do in a situation. But especially for Daddy, like, she was in a position, but still, it's a lot to learn and lot to.
Yeah, no, we could have a session just on the daddies, because they are, and what the daddies and dadas, they really, I feel, are the most remarkable souls on the planet. Absolutely. I could be very biased, but absolutely remarkable. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we'll have a little reflection. Such a fascinating journey of self-transformation. And the sign that I am progressing quickly is that I actually become more and more still, more stable. The mind is racing less and less. There's less upheaval, movement inside. I become more and more still and stable in the sweet silence of deep contentment. Everything that comes at me, I transform into a means of moving closer and closer to my destination, that self-respect, that authenticity, that dignity, good or bad. Everything is transformed into fuel to move me forward spiritually. More and more stable in that stage of truth. Om.
Oh, thank you for joining with us.
Om Shanti.
Wanted to let everyone know that next week is Christmas on Saturday. So I'm quite certain we don't have a session.
I hope that's okay. I'm sure that we will somehow be connecting that weekend in one way or the other. So we don't have anywhere else to go. But anyways, good.